Small towns all across the world seemingly hold tales of terror. This is one of my favorite series, and I'm glad we're finally getting back to it. These subscribers sent in their allegedly true, creepy stories from small towns. As always, it is up to you whether you believe them or not. If you have a story you would like to share, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, without any more hesitation, let's get into these creepy, small town stories that'll keep you up tonight. I am an avid runner. Since my early teen years, I've run through freezing rain and searing heat, foggy nights and sunny days. That said, every once in a while something happens that makes me reconsider my dedication to my passion. On a warm August night, something changed my running habits indefinitely. I had recently moved back into my parents' house in that awkward interim period between college and career. It's funny, because I had done my night runs in sketchy cities and bad neighborhoods for years and nothing special had ever happened. However, in this suburban, middle-upper-class neighborhood on the outskirts of a small town, I had one of my most frightening running experiences ever. My normal 2-mile jog took me through one lamplit intersection 3 times before getting home. Don't ask how exactly, because it's a complex route. Suffice to say, I must go through this intersection once to leave my house, once halfway through my route, and once to get home. I had run this route hundreds of times, both through this intersection and in scarce traffic. The night in question, I took off my run around 10:45. My parents were already off to bed and the neighborhood was usually dead quiet by 9. I went down the street at a standard pace, the silence of the night rejected by the epic music blaring through my cheap Walmart headphones. The first pass through the lamplit intersection came up and I immediately noticed something was off. Under the lamp was the silhouette of a man sitting on the curb, hunched over, legs resting on the road. In this neighborhood, seeing anyone out at night was quite unusual. He was across the street, so I didn't feel imminently threatened by him. Running creates this stupid illusion that you're somehow safe as long as you're moving, even though you're more exposed than ever. The first half of my run took me through a section of houses under construction. It was always creepy in this area, and a few shadows seen out of the corner of my eye had finally inspired me to start running with a small folding knife. It was a stupid security theater on my part. Like a knife that size could do anything. The legal knife limit in my state is 5 inches, and my running knife was jealous of that size. As I ran through the abandoned construction sites, the sight of the man earlier began nagging at me. I half expected him to pop out of one of these shadows created by the large half-built structures. It was really strange, him sitting hunched over like that. His existence there just didn't fit with the vibe of the rest of the neighborhood. My next turn took me back towards the lamplit intersection. A little bit of dread built up in me as I approached the intersection. For a moment, I didn't see the man. I relaxed, hoping he had wandered on. My pounding heart quickly sank as I saw the figure sitting a bit outside of the light on the side of the road I was currently on. It was as if he had changed position, knowing full well where I would come from. I maintained my course and speed, refusing to let some random guy sitting on the curb bother me. I had seen stranger things than a sitting guy. I didn't let it bother me in the slums, I wasn't going to let it bother me here. My confidence melted quickly as I grew closer to the guy. I was 20 feet from him when I noticed the man was fiddling with something in his right hand. 15 feet, the man turned and looked up at me, his hand dropping. 10 feet, he hunched lower, and the thing in his hand concealed by the darkness. 5 feet from the man, I suddenly saw a giant glint in the hand. He had a knife, and not a dinky little folding knife. It was a 12-inch Bowie knife gripped tightly in his fist. I sort of went into autopilot at this point. I was already practically stepping over this weird guy and now realized he had a massive knife. I myself am a collector of knives. It wasn't the knife itself that scared me, it was what he did next. I ran within inches of him, and the man leaned forward and began tapping the knife on the ground just next to my feet. I sort of awkwardly sidestepped away from the man, crossing the street and continuing on my run. It took it to set in what just happened, and that's when I realized I had to pass the guy one more time to get home. I stopped my run, pocketed my headphones, and pulled out my dinky folding knife. I run around a corner of wooden fences and out of sight from the man, so I decided I would peek back around and spy for an opportunity to run through the intersection and back home. As I peeked around the fence and into the light, I was sure more than ever that I should not go back through that intersection. The man with the massive knife was crawling around on all fours. Now, fully revealed by the light and no longer hunched, I could see this guy was big. I would say he appeared around 6 to 6.5 feet tall, but I suppose he was a 6.5 foot long as he was crawling. He clambered around for a while, and then eventually he stopped and was rolling around in the grass. At this point, I noped out of the situation and called the cops. Lucky me, I used my phone as a timer for my runs, so I had it with me that night. I called the operator and let them know the situation. Not to brag, but I sounded super chill when describing the scene to the operator. My chill began to fade as I peeked around the fence to give a description of the guy to the operator. Black pants, boots, gray shirt, standard useless descriptions. It now appeared he was laying down in the road. Not laying down, but sliding. He was pushing himself into a storm drain. As I watched, this guy stuffed his body into the drain. It looked like he was having trouble since he was a big guy, but he was somehow getting in. Like an idiot, I took my eyes off of him and stepped back to safety as the operator told me to. The police arrived a minute or so later. No less than 5 cop cars flooded into the neighborhood. It must have been a slow night. With one of the officers backing me up, I walked back through the intersection to get home. The lamp-lit intersection was empty. No one was there. There wasn't even any evidence someone was there. I waited out in front of my parents' house for a while until one of the police cars drove by me. The officer let me know that they found no one. Whoever it was had slipped away. The police believed it was probably a resident of one of the houses nearby who just ran back home since he saw the emergency lights. I think that's the most likely possibility. I still remember the last time I saw the guy half wedged in the storm drain. Sometimes I wonder if he made it in, and maybe we're both right, the police and I. The man did just run off when he saw the lights, but maybe his home was not one of the houses placed so quaintly above ground. It's probably stupid, but I give most storm drains a wide berth now. Better safe than sorry, when you know there may be a knife-wielding lunatic slashing at your ankles. Let me give you all some description about me before I tell you this story. My name is Evan. I live in northern Alabama and recently moved into a new city. I currently live in a quiet neighborhood with my mom, dad, little brother, and dog. I lived in Huntsville, but after that we moved into Meridianville. This happened during summer vacation when I was 10 years old. I am currently 15. Every day I had chores to do. And on Mondays and Tuesdays I had an extra chore. On Monday I had to take the recycling bin to the road, and the recycling bin is on Tuesday. On Tuesday, I would put the trash to the road because the trash day was on Wednesday. Sometimes, people would drive by while I was outside and I would wave to them. So, it was a normal Tuesday afternoon, around 3:30 p.m., and I went outside to get the recycling bin while I brought the trash to the road. While I got to the edge of the road with the trash, someone was coming up the road. After I had gotten the mail, I gave them a wave, but then they honked at me. When I closed the mailbox, they pulled up next to me to one of my neighbor's houses on the opposite side of the road. He was about 2 houses across, but was within shouting distance. I barely remember what the truck looked like, but but I think it was either an old, rusty dark red or blue pickup truck. A man stepped out of the truck and made direct eye contact with me. He was an African-American guy and had dreadlocks for his hair. He looked like he was in his mid-20s to late 30s. When we made eye contact, he smiled and waved over to me. "Come here," he said. "What?" I replied. "Come here," the man said with a smile still on his face. My heart skipped a beat when I heard him say this. Thankfully, my 10-year-old self knew that this was trouble. I began walking towards my house and he called out to me again. I don't entirely remember what he said, but I remember something along the lines of, Don't tell your mom." I had already gotten inside by the time he finished that sentence. I immediately ran to the kitchen where my mom was washing dishes. When I told her, she was shocked by this and immediately told my dad, who had just woken up from a nap. My dad confronted the guy, and after a few minutes he came back inside. Apparently, my dad told me the man wanted to quote-unquote give me something. After a few more minutes, I saw the truck drive by and then go away down the street. I have never seen that truck or that man again, and I really hate to think what would have happened if I did go to that man's truck. This was a story from 5 years ago, and it still scares me to this very day. I'm going into sophomore year of high school soon, and I'm still careful about strangers to this day. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, Swamp Dweller. I've been debating whether or not I should talk about this, but I think it's interesting enough and I really can't explain exactly what I experienced. So here is some context. My mother-in-law lives in this old cabin that was built by the former landowner over 100 years ago. It's in the middle of the woods on the outskirts of a small town in Washington state. I lived there for about a year before my spouse and I found our own place. The cabin is creepy as all get out. It was all built by hand and is falling apart in a lot of places. I was told the original owner died in it. My experience with the cabin started when I noticed that my mother-in-law's dog would stare into one of the specific corners of the main room. We all sort of thought it was funny and weird until we started randomly barking at the corner. It would happen out of nowhere too. He would be dead asleep in my mother-in-law's lap and sprint to this spot to bark at it. A lot of other weird stuff would happen too. There were times when I was the only one home and would hear footsteps going up and down the hardwood stairs. The rest of the family would hear weird stuff happening around the house too. Nothing actually malicious, just eerie. A little while ago, I took up film photography as a hobby and had some good luck getting what looks like orbs on a few shots from some older buildings and former settlements nearby. And I had the bright idea of shooting the inside of the cabin to see what I might get. So I went out for a visit with the in-laws and brought my camera along and just waited till, the dog started barking at the corner. I excitedly snapped a few shots and took a few more around other parts of the interior and the outside. The thing about the film is that it sometimes can take a while to fill up a roll. A typical 35mm roll of film has 36 exposures on it. The initial cabin trip was at the beginning of one roll and I didn't take very many pictures that day. So I took my camera around the other places and spent a few days taking pictures of other stuff. This is important to know. Roughly about a week later, I went back to the cabin for another visit and decided to get more pictures at the corner with different settings and exposure times, just in case the pictures earlier didn't turn out. I filled out the roll completely and I took it to get developed. I picked up the film a week later and was so excited to see I had captured another orb, or at least what I thought was an orb. The beginning photos, the first few I took in the corner, were blank. I kicked myself a little bit, figuring my settings were off somewhere, but I kept flipping through the rest of all the pictures of the outside of the cabin and the other locations that I went to look for. So, I figured the second day I spent shooting the corner would turn out, right? Well, wrong. even after reshooting with different settings and lenses to ensure a clear shot. The second day of shooting, the cabin and the inside came out blank as well. I have no words to describe how I feel about this. I don't know why only those images wouldn't develop. I've never heard of something like this happening when trying to capture the paranormal, so I thought you all would like to hear about it. So being from a small town, my friends and I don't have much to do on Friday nights. We used to go to graveyards or do ghost hunting as we called it. One night, we set out to adventure and see if we could get scared. And let me tell ya, we got really scared. This wasn't our typical night doing this. Something was eerie and off-putting. About a week later, we all admitted to each other that we all felt the same feelings of sadness when we got there. First off, as we pulled in, 4 of us saw something up ahead. It looked like a real person, clear as day, and suddenly it was gone. So we continued around the path when a tree limb fell about 50 feet ahead of us, as if something was warning us not to go any further. If that's not weird, it gets much weirder. So, my friend, we'll call him Dave, Dave liked to be the tough guy, was never afraid and was literally taunting whatever was near us, calling them cowards and afraid to show themselves. We all heard this big crash, almost like a bowling ball fell on the grass. We all turned around and saw what looked to be a dog. Mind you, it was on all 4s, and as it passed a large birch tree, it stood up on the back legs. This creature wasn't a bear or a dog, but looked like a demon of sorts. It had red eyes, maybe was 6 feet tall, and had the evilest smirk on its face. We all ran as fast as we could, got in the car, and left immediately. I couldn't even look back because I was way too scared. It was a very, very quiet drive after that. When I first moved into my new apartment, I was moving from one small town to another. So, I had the idea of what I was getting myself into. The apartment was smack dab in the middle of town, so it was central to all the places I'd be looking for a new job. I paid the security deposit in mid-January of 2018, and I would not be moving in until May 25th of 2018. I was told there was a vacancy and that the apartment would be held for me. I went on about my life. Months later, my boyfriend and I moved into the town with everything we owned packed in a trailer. His mother and stepfather helped us with the move, driving the trailer and hauled over our belongings across the state. The trailer would be needed once we got into the town because his parents had been generous enough to buy us furniture set from a shop downtown, and the trailer would be used to pick up the furniture and haul it to our new apartment. When we got to the apartment complex, we went to the front office and one of the assistants got us our lease paperwork ready for us to sign, and while we were going over the fine print, she left the room to make a call. When she got back, she took our forms and filed them away, gave us copies, and then started chatting about the complex and our lives, this and that. It started to feel like she was stalling. We asked her what was taking so long and why we weren't being given our keys. She said it was due to maintenance needing to fix a few things in our apartment. A door needed replacing, is what she told us. She asked if we would be willing to wait until 12 or 1 p.m., which would be over 2 hours, and we told her that wouldn't work because we needed to unload all our belongings so we could take the trailer into the city and pick up the furniture that was waiting for us. She made another call and told us that we would have to wait at least 30 minutes for them to finish cleaning up the apartment. We agreed, but my boyfriend's parents were upset and wanted us to get settled in so they could hit the road, as they had been traveling all week. The assistant, I'll call her Day, took us on a tour of the apartment complex. It was very hot outside as Day showed us around, telling us where we could park and showing us the gym and the swimming pool areas. Finally, Day took us to our apartment, which was the last building on the lot, and she gave us a key, informing us we would need to pick up a second key at the front office once it had been made. We were a little annoyed at the fact that they hadn't already been made. We were also annoyed that maintenance was working on a door in our apartment when they had 4 months to take care of that, considering we'd signed the deposit forms in January and it was nearing June. We stuck the key in the lock of our new apartment, but it was already unlocked, oddly enough. When the door opened, a woman was standing in the hall, finishing up painting the wooden frame of our soon-to-be bedroom door. We were startled to see her there. She was kind, smiles, and mourned us of the wet door frame. When she left, she took a broom and scraps of wood with her. The apartment smelled strange. That's the first thing we noticed. My boyfriend kept saying as we carried box after box into the apartment, something was just off. I told him the smell might go away after the paint dried. We left the door open to air the place out, and I noticed the floor seemed dusty, even though the woman told us she had mopped it the day before. The floor did not look very clean, though. Our cat was tired of being in her cage, so we decided to let her out in the empty room. We shut the door so she wouldn't get out of the apartment. As soon as the door closed, she started panicking. She meowed and cried and pawed at the door to let us out, but we kept trying to calm her by sliding her treats under the door. She was not happy to be locked in the room. She seemed scared and skittish, but we were just too busy. We couldn't, we honestly couldn't have her getting stepped on or running outside, as she is an inside cat. Finally, we got everything moved into the apartment. My boyfriend and I started organizing boxes per room, waiting for his parents to get back with the new furniture. So, we began putting the furniture together and unpacking, trying to get the apartment as homey as we could. But the smell lingered there. It was tangy and wet. The smell of something that had died. We thought maybe something had died in the vents, but eventually the more we aired out the apartment, the more the smell faded. His parents got us settled in as they could, and my boyfriend got ready for a job interview he had that evening. Soon after, he found a job, but I struggled to find something. I was offered a position, but would have to wait it out for the summer and start in August. During that time, I was home all day, every day, and I started to get the feeling I was not alone. I felt the presence most in the kitchen, but I felt it all over. I felt like I was intruding on someone else's room when I walked into my own bedroom. I felt like I was being watched while I cooked in the kitchen, or watched from the windowed kitchen wall while I was in the living room. Or while I'd be in the bedroom, I'd hear noises in the kitchen. I'd go into the kitchen, and shuffling could be heard in the bedroom. I got a feeling in my gut someone had died in the apartment. Things started going missing or being misplaced. I told my boyfriend of the feelings I was having, and he started telling me that he felt the same way. During the first few weeks, we had been receiving a lot of mail, most of it not being ours. I returned it to the sender. The same name, I'll call the man, Ken B, kept appearing, and I wondered why the man who lived in the apartment before us had not changed his mailing address, until the day the green envelope arrived. I am not one to break the law. I would never open someone else's mail, but the green envelope had already been opened. When I pulled the envelope from the mailbox, a silver charm fell out of the envelope, and it clinked across the concrete. A dragonfly pendant laid on the ground. I was confused about how it had just fallen out of the envelope until I realized it must have been too thick for the envelope. It had been inspected by USPS, since they have rules about, placing bulky or non-paper items inside of flat envelopes. The green envelope had been inspected and was wide open. It was addressed to the family of Ken B. My heart started racing. I didn't pull the card out of the envelope. Instead, when I slipped the charm into the envelope, I peeked at the inside of the card and saw the only confirmation I needed. We are deeply saddened by the passing of your loved one, Ken B. I froze, clutched the letter to my chest, and turned back toward the apartment complex. I was afraid to go back inside. After having my gut feeling confirmed, I immediately ran to my laptop, looked up Ken's name, and his obituary popped up on my first search. Heart attack. His face stared back at me from the screen, and I looked at the date of birth and the date of death and wanted to vomit. He had died in March, 2 months before we moved in. I remembered the woman painting our new door frame. Maintenance had to fix our bedroom door, perhaps because Ken had been locked on the other side of it, dead in the room I now sleep in. I told my boyfriend and we both freaked out together, but he asked me not to show him the picture of Ken, so I didn't. I sealed the green envelope, wrote "Return to Sender," and put it in the mailbox. It stayed there for weeks. The mailman wasn't taking it for some reason. So each time I opened the mailbox it was there, staring at me, waiting to be given to the mourning family. One day I decided I wasn't taking the green envelope to the post office and I was going to just return it myself. But when I opened the mailbox, it was gone. Time passed, I had started my new job and was happy to not be cooped up in the apartment all day. Our friend Lisa came to stay with us over the weekend. She stayed at home while we went to work that Friday. And when I got back to the apartment, she told me she swore someone had to have died in the apartment. She told me she kept getting the feeling that she was being watched from the kitchen, or that when she went to the bathroom, a presence lingered in the bedroom as she passed by it. I told her I had those feelings too. I told her about the green envelope, about Ken, about maintenance working on the apartment just minutes before we moved in. The smell when we first moved and opened the door, the noises, my research on his death, everything. She was thoroughly freaked out, and still feels that way when she comes to visit. I have lived in this apartment for a little over a year now, and I've had many experiences there. I still feel Ken when I come home from a long day of work, as if his presence is in the back room, resting, or in the many kitchen experiences that I have with him. It seems like he likes to cause a scene in there. My cats, we got another one, see him all the time. Whether he's standing beside me or walking across the hall, one of my cats, the new one, will get on top of the fridge and stare at the corner of the kitchen for long periods of time, at something that is not visible to me. My boyfriend and I wanted to move when our 12-month lease was up, but the timing and our finances weren't right, so we signed another 12-month lease, and we have to suck it up and deal with Ken's spirit for a bit longer. I do wish, though, that I hadn't seen his face, because now if I do see something walking down the hall at the corner of my eye, I'll know exactly who it is. I grew up in a really old house located in a small town in Iran. This house had 4 rooftops, 4 basements, 2 massive yards, and 3 separate parts for living. My grandfather, his siblings, and all their children used to live in this house. But by the time I was born, it was only my family. We're 5 members that lived there. So, most part of the house was deserted and really scary, to be honest. The house being home to many bats made it quite scarier, but the worst part was there were around 15 people buried in the basements. All family members from the time of my great-grandfather and before that. Most of them were children. Seems like in the old ages when children would die of illness upon being born, their parents would bury them in their home, for whatever creepy reason. So, the house was creepy enough, but the town was also creepy. Nearly all its population believed that its town was home to jinns. Stories about seeing these jinns were all over the place. So, during the 10 years that I lived in that house, there were many times that me and my family had seen shadows passing, things being misplaced, the sounds of footsteps, etc. We had gotten used to it, but there's a particular memory that I remember very vividly. When I was 9 years old, I was playing hide and seek with my siblings and cousins. I was the seeker at the time. There was this room with a huge window with pink curtains. The window would open to a hallway. I was standing in the hallway. The window was open, and I saw that a very vivid white hand is grabbing on the curtains. I was sure it was my sister's hand. I stood there a bit, watching the hand, laughing about with myself about how to fool my sister. I was about to reveal where she was hiding. I went into the room, and there was no one by the window. I searched the entire room because I was sure that there was someone there, but I found no one. Then I ran out of the room and started screaming my lungs out. My siblings and cousins came out of their hiding places, and no one had hidden anywhere near that room. To this day, I'm still haunted by the image of that hand. I saw some sort of wolf-like creature on the side of the road. I live in a small border town in southwestern Arizona, and there's not a lot to do around here, so a good time killer is just cruising around. My girlfriend and I were on a date 3 days ago, and by the time the end of it came, we just cruised around talking and listening to music until around 1 a.m. We decided to call it a night, and as I'm driving her back home, we both see this giant, 4-legged creature on the side of the road with its back towards us. Its fur was rough looking, and it had this whitish-grayish color to it. I immediately thought it was a messed up giant mountain lion, since they're not uncommon around here. I slowed down a bit so we could take a better look at it, and that's when it turned around and faced us. And that's when I knew we were dealing with a whole new different thing here. It had the most ferocious and terrifying face I have ever seen. It had a long snout, just like a wolf. It had its mouth open and we could see some big and sharp looking teeth. It was hunched over, making its back seem like a mountain, and its fur was standing up like a cat's does when it's scared. We had the lights of the car on it. Its eyes seemed to glow red as well. After seeing this, I stepped on the gas and got the hell out of there. I was so scared. My girlfriend and I were genuinely in shock for a while until I asked her if she saw that thing or if I was just going crazy. She confirmed and gave me the same exact description of the creature that I saw. After a bit of digging around, I found out that the only type of wolf that was once found here is the Mexican gray wolf, but they are critically endangered now, and they were extirpated from around here a long time ago. That type of wolf can only be found in southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. The sheer size and appearance of this thing rules out coyotes and dogs entirely. I am honestly amazed and a bit worried as to what we witnessed that night. What could this thing be? Do any of you guys have any ideas? I grew up in one of the scariest places in the world, Central Florida, Ocala to be exact. But this isn't a story about Florida for once. I went to Vanguard High School, which is known for their IB program in producing the likes of Dante Culpepper and one of the founders of Facebook. My freshman year of high school, I sat behind this guy named Jason in science class, who appeared to be extremely dumb, lazy, and yet somehow he was also extremely popular. He would constantly try cheating off my lab partner and I. Most of the time, I didn't care if it was just to copy pasta homework, but I wasn't having it when he was trying to get the answers for major tests. I told him politely to F off. He kept begging me for the answers, trying to use his charm, and when that didn't work, he turned to a shade of red I had only seen in movies. He looked like he was going to stroke out. Suddenly, he swept his arm across his lab table, knocking everything onto the floor with a loud bang, stood up facing my lab table and bellowed, "You effing B," at me. I was stunned. The class was stunned. The teacher was stunned. The teacher told him to go to the office, and Jason grabbed his stuff and walked out. He got sent to ISS for a day or two and never spoke to me again. Years later, Jason was dating a girl named Dara. They had 2 kids together, the youngest which they put up for adoption, and they both had pretty serious cocaine addictions. Dara's family hated Jason because he was dealing, and they had both had the cops called on them for domestic stuff. They tried to keep her away from him, but it was just one of those types of relationships, and she'd always go back to him. One day, a father and son were out four-wheeling in a wooded area, and they came across a badly burned carcass. Not sure if it was an animal or a person. The father called the cops. Dara had been missing for about a week, but since she was known for partying and drug binges, her family thought nothing of it until a news report about a body of a badly burned blonde girl was discovered in the woods. Her brother called the police and the identification tests were run. It was Dara. Jason confessed a few days later he was arrested and put on trial. Dara was shot in the temple and then burned in the woods area and tried to conceal the crime. Jason's lawyer tried to use Dara's volatile behavior and the fact that she had cocaine in her system and alcohol, that she was somehow, crazy, and maybe Dara killed herself and Jason just burned the evidence. But it didn't work, and Jason was found guilty and sentenced to life with a 25-year minimum mandatory sentence. I remember hearing the story before he was convicted and thinking back to that insane outburst in science class, and my gut said, hell yeah, that psycho did it. So I am from Alexandria, Kentucky, and I saw something last night that I couldn't entirely explain. Last night was Midnight's Madness for our school. It's basically some stupid football event during the summer, but everyone goes to see people they haven't seen over summer. I went with my 2 friends and one of their girlfriends. We got there around 10:45. Me and my friends were getting pretty bored of the event, and one of my friends had just bought dabs. For those who do not know, dabs are like a concentrated form of weed. We got in my buddy's car and were looking for a place to smoke. We were driving around this subdivision that had very thick forest all around it. We settled on this abandoned house and decided to smoke in the woods behind it. My friend was setting up his rig and we realized he had forgotten the water for the dab rig. A dab rig is basically a bong for dabs, and it needs water or else it would be very harsh to smoke. Well, we had it parked a little bit down the street so no one would be suspicious. Nobody wanted to go back to the car because it was a 5-minute walk. So I decided to go back for the water, being as I was the only one who was even down for the walk, I guess. While I was walking back, I heard something scratching from behind a nearby house. It kind of freaked me out, but I thought it must have been a dog or an animal. I made it to the car and got the water and started heading back. As I was walking by the house, I heard the scratching. I began to hear it again. Then, I heard what sounded like a footstep kicking up gravel when someone starts trying to run. I turn and see something that has kept me up all night. Now keep in mind, I'm a 6'2", 17-year-old guy, so I am bigger than most things. And this thing that I saw had me easily beaten height by 2 or 3 feet. It was slender, but with long, almost stretched out limbs. I couldn't barely make out any more details because it was pretty dark. The creature was running from one backyard to another. I never saw its face, only its body. It ran on 2 feet, but was faster than any person I have ever seen. It ran faster than any human being I have ever seen, period. The creature made it from one backyard to the next about 50 to 90 feet in about 5 seconds or less. I was standing in the middle of the street about 30 feet away. I stood there for a second in complete shock. Then I ran as fast as I could to my friends. I ran through thorns and bushes to make it back to them. I ran and told them what I saw. I'm not too sure if they believed me, but the panic in my voice was enough for them to know I had seen something. We all packed up our rig, went back to the car, and I have been up all night trying to figure out what I've seen. The 2 closest things I've seen on the internet is something called the Dover Demon and something called the Wood Devil. I never saw its face, so I'm not too sure what this thing possibly was, and if anyone can help me explain what I saw or has had a similar experience, please let me know in the comments down below. And please, people, just know I was 100% sober at the time when I saw the creature. This took place around 2 years ago when I was a junior in high school. It started out as a normal day getting ready to walk to my bus stop. I wake up, get dressed, walk out my door, and make my way to my bus stop. Nothing had suggested that I would see what I saw while I was walking on the stop. This event occurred a mere 4 to 5 blocks away from my house. So, as I was approaching this intersection adjacent to my local middle school, I saw this Ford Expedition looking type vehicle that was gray in color pull up to a stop sign in this intersection. I think nothing of it really. It's a small town and you see cars all the time. I mean, just like you would anywhere else. Why would you think any differently? I panned my eyes down for what could not have been more than 2 seconds, and I gazed back upward only to see that the car was nowhere in sight. Now keep in mind, anywhere this car could have went, it would have surely been in my line of sight as the roads are pretty long and straight here. The only way this car could have been out of my sight in that amount of time if I looked down is if this car had gunned it down the street. But this wasn't a viable option, as after looking down I did not hear anything from that car. It was completely silent. After all of this, I was left in a weird state of confusion and awe, knowing I had saw something not of this world. My dad chalked it up as a hallucination and jokingly said I need to stop smoking so much weed. But I had not smoked that day, or even that week. Not that weed is a hallucinogenic anyway. What do you guys think? Let me know. Thanks for listening to these creepy, allegedly true small town stories. I know for a fact, being from a small town myself, I would not want to have to deal with any of these things. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. The more likes this video gets, the more YouTube promotes it to fresh new eyes. If you're new to the swamp, why not turn on notifications, subscribe, and join us? I upload videos almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. Just go ahead and hit that big red subscribe button and turn on notifications. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here lurking in the swamp, and I'm sure they would love to hear them. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. If you guys don't already know, you can download your favorite scary stories from the swamp on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and pretty much every other major podcast hosting site. Definitely go check that out. It's definitely a great place to go to bring stories with you when you don't have data and can't connect to Wi-Fi. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.